So let's get started. I think this is probably it for the evening, and so I'm just going to uh, give you a sense of the structure of the evening. So uh, I'm going to do a meditation now in a few moments. So if you need to quickly dash to get any of your meditation gear or any blankets or make yourself comfortable, you can do that in a moment. Um, so we're going to sit for about 15 minutes. Then I'm going to have a recap of last week, a kind of a shortened version of what we covered last week. Then we can go into our breakout groups and discuss how we got on during the week with our home practice. Um, and don't panic if you haven't felt like you haven't done your homework. That's okay. Uh, just share with your group what you have done or what you think the limitations were if you haven't it done. So don't run away screaming if you haven't done your homework. It's not that kind of course. Uh, and then we're going to have a tea break for about 10 minutes. And after that, then we are going to um, hear from Vajrashura, who's going to teach us a bit about the wheel of life, a very important symbol in the Buddhist tradition, and particularly from a perspective of the reactive and creative mind. So that should be really good. And let me get my notes. Okay, so we're going to start off with the meditation. So make yourself comfortable, and as I said, this is going to be about 15 minutes long. So put yourself into that upright and alert, but yet relaxed and comfortable sort of posture. So you don't have to be in a particular, I'm sitting cross-legged on a cushion, but you can just sit in your chair or a couch in as upright a position as you can. And making sure that your chest is as open as possible, your shoulders are relaxed, your neck is long and loose, your skull is just sort of gently balanced on the top of your spine. It's good to have some support for your hands as well. If you're already in your posture, don't worry too much about it. But in future, if you'd like to have something maybe on your lap or a blanket wrapped around you, in a way that you can sort of have a bit of support to your hands and your arms, and that will help you relax the shoulders a bit. So just start becoming aware of your surroundings. If you close your eyes, the first thing you're probably aware of is the sounds. Maybe traffic outside or other people in the house. Sound of appliances or lights, plumbing, whatever it is, just noticing those sounds, not getting too caught up in them. Become aware of the space that you're occupying in the room, your position in the room, the placement of your body in relation to everything else. Noticing your posture, just making any small amendments. Being upright, relaxed, alert. bring your attention to the sensations of contact with the floor, the couch, the chair, whatever your support is. The solidity of what you're in contact with. Become aware now of the sensations in your feet. Notice the sensations of your lower leg, your knees, your thighs. The entirety of your legs. Noticing the groin area, your hips, your sitting bones, your buttocks. All the sensations in that pelvic area. The whole of the body from the waist down. Moving your awareness now to the base of the spine, the lower back. Moving up along the spine, the middle of the spine, the back of the rib cage, shoulder blades, moving up along the spine to the back of the neck, the shoulders. Are you holding any unnecessary tension in the shoulders? Try to release the upper arms, the elbows, forearms, all the sensations of the hands. Noticing the chest, sides of the torso under the armpits, noticing the heart area, and the belly. Try and let go of any unnecessary holding in the belly. Bringing awareness to the face, the jaw. Sure, we're not holding any tension unnecessarily in the jaw area. Maybe letting it release a little bit. Also our forehead. Imagining all the tiny muscles in the forehead relaxing, letting go, releasing. And the head, the scalp. Noticing what sensations are there, the scalp area. The entire body. Just for the last few moments, bringing attention to the movement of the body with the breath. Particularly noticing the out-breath and the release that comes with that. And just for the last few moments, just keeping your awareness on the breath, sensations of the breath. So where is your mind now? Maybe it's wandered off. That's okay. Just noticing that, very kindly bringing it back to the sensations of the breath in the body. Wherever you most feel the sensations. Now just letting go of any effort. Just for the last few seconds, just noticing the effects of the practice. How are you feeling now in comparison to the start of the practice? Whenever you're ready, slowly bringing back some movement into your hands and feet to start with, and then opening your eyes, just sitting normally again. Okay. So, let's get my notes up again. So just a quick recap, a not so big explanation of last week's material. So we started off with the image of enlightenment. So we started off with the Buddha, and the image of enlightenment embodied in the figure of the Buddha, and the universality of that, and how enlightenment essentially is ineffable. We cannot communicate what enlightenment is, but the image of the Buddha in and of itself is communicating something about what that is. And if you recall, we did an exercise where we brought to mind some of the qualities that the Buddha represents for us. And it seems like we all had a sense of what it was getting at, the sort of direction of enlightenment. Then we looked at enlightenment in terms of words, so the kind of language approach. And while, enlightenment cannot fully be communicated in language, words can certainly help us get on the path and can certainly help us get a sense of that direction. So we looked at what enlightenment was, what enlightenment is not. We said how it's not becoming one with everything. And after the course, actually, I had a very interesting question. Someone asked about it's not about becoming one with everything, but then brought up the fact that I said it is interconnected. It is interconnectedness, and how are these things different? And I thought that was a really, really good question. So I thought I'd bring it out in this recap. I gave a very technical answer. It was something like, the idea of becoming one with everything is kind of a Hindu idea of becoming one with Brahma, a kind of a universal entity, and you become one with it, whereas interconnectedness is about conditionality and the interrelation between us and everything in our environment, and how we're conditioned by everything, and in turn so anyways, it was kind of a complicated answer, and I was kind of like, if you really understand something, you should be able to give a simple answer to it. And I felt like I gave a really technical answer, and I was kind of reflecting on that a bit. It's like, how could I explain that more simply? And in a way, I wasn't able to. But it's probably because I don't see, I'm so far from enlightenment, I haven't quite gotten to a point of that interconnectedness that I can actually describe it in a very simple terms. So I thought I'd bring that up because it's kind of like an invitation to you to kind of try to grasp these things yourself as well, because I think the more I practice and the deeper my practice goes, hopefully I'll be able to give simpler answers than the very technical one that I gave. I think it is something you feel into. The interconnectedness is about a feeling into something that's about or a relationship with everything around us, as opposed to unifying with a sort of a godlike figure. Anyway, I thought I'd bring that up. So that's what enlightenment is not. It's not becoming one with everything. It's not immortality, and it's the complete absence of craving, of ill will, and of desire. What enlightenment is something we also explored. It is interconnectedness, as I just said. It's bliss and happiness, regardless of our situation. It is the deathlessness. It is the deathless. It is compassion. It's seeing things as they really are. And it's total contentment. So we got a sense of enlightenment. Then we looked at the three big ideas. The kind of main thrust of the lecture that Sangharakshita gave, Mind, Reactive and Creative. And the first of these three big ideas is that mind is the basis for all experience. And in the reflection that we did at the end of the session, I quoted the Dhammapada in saying that experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. So hopefully this gave us a sense of the of how mind is the basis for all experience. Mind is twofold. So we have the big mind, the Buddha mind, or absolute mind, to use the more traditional language. And we have the relative mind, the mind that we're more familiar with. And relative mind is kind of where it's at for us in our current unenlightened state. So in a way, we don't have to worry too much about the big mind. We just kind of have it as a sense of it, that's a thing. But relative mind is where we're working at. It's where we can get our teeth into things. The relative mind operates in two ways. So this is the second big idea. It's not two minds, it's one mind operating in two ways. It can operate reactively, and it can operate creatively. The reactive mind, as we explored, was the habitual mind. It reacts to stimuli without any agency involved, and to that extent, it isn't free. It's not a free mind. Whereas the creative mind is spontaneous. It's aware. It operates out of the depths of its own nature. And to that extent, it's authentic. It's sort of an authentic mind. It utilizes the agency of the individual by choosing how to respond. So we used it in our community. We tend to use the term respond rather than react when we're talking about working creatively. And to that degree, the creative mind is free. So I heard a story during the week that I thought kind of illustrated something of the creative and reactive mind, even though it doesn't use that language. But I thought I'd just tell the story very quickly. So a samurai in feudal Japan goes to a Zen master. It's always a Zen master as opposed to another. There's many forms of Buddhism in Japan, but it always seems to be a Zen master in these stories. And he asks the teacher, "Tell me the true nature of heaven and hell, or I will kill you with my sword." And the wise monk responded, "Wow, I'm surprised someone who looks as dumb and ugly as you knows how to wield a sword." So in absolute rage, the samurai pulls out his sword to strike the wise monk. And just before he can strike the wise monk, he says, "This here is hell." And the samurai is frozen and is going, oh, the words just struck him so strongly. And he's totally flabbergasted. And then he realizes the truth of that. So he puts down his sword, and in remorse, he bows down to the monk and says, "I've caused so much harm. Please take me as your disciple and teach me the Dharma." And the monk responds, "And this is heaven." So I think you could as easily say, you could easily translate heaven and hell there for reactive and creative. And the reactive mind is the mind that just, it's his habit of violence, responding to the stimuli of the monk insulting him. And he's trapped in this uncreative, unreflective, habitual response to that agitation. And when he sees that, he notices that, the monk has pointed out this reactive mind to him, how trapped he is, how the hell state of that. And he decides he's going to not do that. He's going to practice the Dharma, the teaching of the Buddha, and learn how to be more creative. And this is what the monk says is heaven. This kind of brings us nicely to the last big idea, which is that the reactive mind leads to suffering for oneself and for others, and the creative mind leads to happiness and freedom for oneself and others. And again, we had the reflection in the Dhammapada, the lines. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cart wheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows, like a shadow that never departs. The path, one leads to suffering, one leads to happiness. So that was the gist of it last week. So I gave you some homework to do last week. As I said at the beginning, don't worry, don't panic if you haven't done it. But we are going to go into breakout groups now in a few moments. So just a few pointers on this. So it's going to be a bit different this week. Oscar is going to open the rooms. He'll have the rooms set up, and he's named the rooms. So he's put the leaders' names and the color of the leaders' names in the name of the group. And what I'm asking you to do this week is to assign yourself. So you'll have the option this week to click into the group. So you'll have to remember which group you're in from last week. If you don't remember, don't panic. Just hold on. Oscar does have a list. But just to get the ball rolling, if you remember the group, just select the option for your group. Sometimes it doesn't come up for some people if you don't have the most up-to-date Zoom, or sometimes if you're on your phone, it may not work. So don't panic again. Oscar will assign you to the room if that does happen. So just a reminder, Oscar might put this into the chat box, the reminder of last week's homework, or what you can choose to speak about in these breakout groups, is the following questions. Did you notice when you were particularly creative during this week? So I asked if you could pay particular attention to this, and maybe even journal, write it down when you've noticed that you've been particularly creative. What did you think of the reading material this week? So I've asked you to read some. I think it was up to pages 17 of the ebook that accompanies the course. So hopefully you've had a chance to read that. And the last is how were your meditations this week? I asked you to meditate every day if possible, and to bring some attention to the way you meditate. If you are meditating every day, are you being creative in it, or are you stuck in a habitual pattern? So, Oscar, if you could set it for 12 minutes, so there'll be a timer for 12 minutes, and yeah, and if you want to, whenever you're ready, then Oscar, to get the groups going, we'll be good to go.
Okay, well, I'll start by answering Dee's question maybe. So, Dee, there's varying schools of thought in Buddhism. Some schools, you might have heard of the Yogacara, would say it's all mind, and whatever you make of that. But in a way, your Buddhism isn't really that interested in answering that question. Basically, what it's saying is all you can ever know of the world is through your mind. It's only your mind with which you can see the world. So if you have a mind colored by irritability, you'll see the world you'll experience a certain kind of world. And if you experience the world with a mind of love, you'll experience a different kind of world. And Buddhism says that you cannot experience the world except through the senses and through the mind that you have. So is there an objective matter independent of your mind? Buddhism doesn't answer that. It says you can never find out if that's true or not, because all you can ever know is through the mind that you have right now and the quality of the mind that you have right now. So it's actually uninterested, actually, in whether there is an objective world or not, so to speak. It's just saying we create worlds that we live in, and the shape and color and quality of that world is determined by our minds and the quality of the other minds that we meet. So is there objective matter? Maybe not. We'll never know. All we can have is an experience of matter that we call matter. But one thing we can be sure of is that whatever label we put to that experience will probably subtly be incorrect about it. We'll make assumptions about it. We'll do all kinds of things around it. And even physics, thanks, Mairead. Yeah, even physics is increasingly coming, like I'm a theoretical physicist by my background, and cutting edge physics these days is increasingly of the opinion that the idea of objective matter is just inconsistent. It causes problems in the latest maths that is emerging. And all there is then is really all you can say is that there's qualities that we can observe in things. Matter has a quality of solidity, for example, but that's our experience of it, and it might be different to someone else. So it's very, very, like, the world is much more crazy than we think it is. Anyways, there's a whole load of other things I could say about that. There's a whole course I lead on Buddhism and science, but I'll leave it there. Although the material tonight does touch into this a bit more, so we'll go on to the material as well. Did you add anything or ask anything else?
No, I have a feeling like I have a few follow-up questions, but it's okay for now. I mean, that's how I have understood it. But yeah, anyway, I think it's another. Other things are feeding into this question, which I can get answered another time.
Well, the other thing just to say is that we have a very, very strong modern scientific materialistic tendency to think of there being an objective universe out there, and Buddhism would say we only think that there's an objective universe out there. We can never really know. And it's actually in some ways more useful not to think in that way, because of just the degree to which we shape our world around us. It's useful if you're designing computers and space rockets and things like that, but it might not be so useful at times for being happy and well and not causing wars in Ukraine and things like that, Okay, so let's go on to the material tonight. So the material tonight, again, the starting point, as Prasannadeva was saying earlier and last week, is the starting point of Buddhism is the mind. Everything comes back to the mind in Buddhism. And we have the reactive mind, which is the unaware, zombie-like mind, which just is repetitive and mechanical. And there's a great line from the text, if you've read the text: in a state of sleep, we eat, we drink, we talk, we work, we play, we vote, we make love, we even read books on Buddhism asleep. So he's talking in terms of not being awakened, not being enlightened. And then the creative mind is independent, responsive, and aware. And if you read on in the book, which some of you in our group did, and which I'll be asking you to do tonight as well for the home practice, Sangharakshita, or Bhante as we call him, then goes into symbols for the mind. And the main symbol he goes into is the wheel of life. So I'm just going to share this image of the wheel of life. It's one particular painting by an order member in our community called Aloka. So it's quite a complex image. Hopefully you can see that on your screens. And so this apparently, I'm not sure if this is literally true because the times don't quite work out, but this is called the Tibetan Wheel of Life, but it goes back to a very early school of Buddhism called the Sarvastivada, or the Sarvastivadins. And according to their story, the Buddha instructed them to paint this on the gateway of every monastery, of every Buddhist monastery. So that as you go into the monastery, you would see this picture and it would remind you of what the spiritual life is about. So there's a whole lot of things going on in it. And this is a slightly simplified version of it. So it's called the Wheel of Life. So it's a wheel. If you can't see that, yeah, I'll send the link actually. Prasannadeva, I'll just take a note actually. I'll send this as an image. So there's quite a lot going on. So in the middle, Oscar, can you nod if you can see my mouse moving there? Yeah, okay. So you have the hub of the wheel. And this is what turns the whole of the wheel, basically. And so this is a cock, a snake, and a pig. And they represent greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah. And it's greed, hatred, and delusion that turn the cyclic reactive mind, basically. And in a way, the Wheel of Life represents ultimately the round of life going round and round again repetitively. So ultimately it represents the reactive mind, but it does point the way into the creative mind as well, as we'll see. And I should just say that we're going to be looking at this wheel this week and next week, in particular the 6 realms, which I'll come to in a moment. And then in week 4, we'll be looking at the way off the wheel as well. And we'll talk then more about the creative mind and the creative spiral as opposed to a reactive circle. So that's the innermost section, the greed, hatred, delusion. And then you have the white section and the black section. So the white section is here and the black section is here. And this is a rather modern wheel of life, but often in more traditional ones in Tibet, you get to see beings joyfully ascending up the white and being pulled down unhappily down in the black sections. And this is, these indicate, you could say, ethical states of mind, positive states of mind leading us upwards into happier states of being, and negative states of mind leading us down into more unhappy states of being. So these are the traditional images going back thousands of years in Buddhism in India. And yeah, I'll come back to those again, actually, or I'll come back to what I mean by ethical, but ethical actions leading us to greater happiness. Actually, it leads from the hell realm at the bottom to the heavenly realm at the top, you could say. And then unethical actions leading us from the heaven at the top down to the hell at the bottom. And then the 6 realms are the next one. So here we have the gods, the titans, the animals, the hell realms, the hungry ghosts, and the human realms. I'll come back to those in a moment because that's what we're going to spend most of tonight on. And then this outer realm, outer wheel, is called the 12 nidanas, or 12 links. And they're a very famous teaching in Buddhism if you read it at all in any depth. And they're far too complex to go into here, but we are going to touch into them in week 4 a bit more. So they describe how when we act ethically, we create a certain type of world for ourselves, or a certain type of outcomes. And when we act unethically, and I'll come back to what I mean by those terms in a moment, when we act unethically, we create a different kind of world for ourselves, yeah? And on this outer circle is the possibility of freedom, yeah? Freedom from the wheel. And then outwardly again, we have this terrifying monster around the outside, and he is Yama, the god of death, yeah? Or the being of death. God in Buddhism is more like just a being. It's not like capital G God. He is a god of death, or the god of death. And he represents being caught in the reactive mind and just cycling around again and again and again without hope of creativity, you could say. He represents Well, traditionally he would represent dying and being reborn again and again. Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. And then out of the very outside, we have the Buddha up here on the top, up in the top right, and the Buddha is pointing towards the moon, which is in the top left. And it's quite traditional in Buddhist tankas, Buddhist paintings, that you have the sun and the moon. And here we have the Buddha as the sun. They're both symbols for wisdom, you could say, pointing to the moon. And in India, apparently, they don't see the man in the moon; they see the rabbit or hare, it looks like, actually, in the moon. So that's their interpretation of things. The moon in Indian Buddhism traditionally means wisdom, cooling, cooling the heat of greed, hatred, and delusion. So the Buddha is pointing away off the wheel as well there. Okay, so I wanted to come back then to these 6 realms. And these are 6 ways. I'm sorry, before I come on to those, these are 6 ways that we can exist in the world, but they're determined by the inner circles, you could say. Yeah, thanks, Albert. So the inner, these are the 3 poisons they're sometimes referred to, and it's these that determine what world we tend to occupy. So if you have greed, hatred, and delusion, you can also have their opposites. So you could say that greed, hatred, and delusion are functions of the reactive mind that we've been talking about, and they have their opposites as well. So anyone want to suggest in the chat the opposite of greed, some like obvious opposites that you might have to greed? It'd be great to hear from, just so it's not me talking at you all the time. Great, so charity, generosity. There's probably loads of them you could have. Service, yeah. Poverty. I guess a positive poverty you could have, like a simplicity maybe, Derek. Trust, yeah. Selflessness, yeah, yeah. Kindness, yeah, yeah. So these are all good. And then, so there's more coming in, no doubt. Contentment is a good one, yeah. Compassion is a good one. And then the next one is hatred. So what opposites of hatred would there be? I mean, compassion, again, like Anne said there, would work for hatred as well. So the opposite of hatred would be love. That's the one I have, yeah, written down here. Benevolence, positive regard. Some people are definitely fast at typing. Gentleness, yeah. Kindness, yeah. Great, respect, yeah, good. And then delusion is the third one. So what will be some kind of opposite to delusion? So clarity, wakefulness, awareness, lucidity, yeah, these are all good. Mindfulness, yeah. Reality, yeah. Insight, insightful rather. Wisdom, measured delusiveness. Not sure about that, Derek, but truth, enlightenment, yeah. Okay, great. So you can keep typing if you have them. But so basically, when I was talking about ethical earlier, ethical actions leading you to happier states and unethical actions leading you to negative states, what I mean there is that if you're unethical, you're doing actions based upon greed, hatred, and delusion, and all the variations of those. And if you're being ethically skillful or positively ethical, you're doing all those things that you've all just typed in there in the chat. You're doing all those, you're trying to live according to, or your actions are based upon all those things that you've mentioned. In particular, the opposite of greed as generosity, the opposite of hatred as love, and the opposite of delusion as awareness or wisdom. Yeah. So these are all, that's what I mean. And this is what karma is basically. If you've ever heard this word karma, that simply means your actions have consequences. And negative actions, unskillful actions are based upon the 3 poisons, and skillful actions, positive actions, are based upon the opposites to the 3 poisons. Yeah. And that is what the second circle is there. There's no God or no punishment involved in that. It just means that if you're generous, you'll tend to be happier and well and live in a more connected world. If you're greedy, you'll tend to live in a world that's a bit more closed down. Yeah. So I want to do a reflection now before we go into the 6 realms. I might leave the Wheel of Life up there because it's quite striking to look at, but let's do a reflection. You can close your eyes actually during the reflection. We'll just do this for about 5 minutes. So tuning in again to a sense of your body, a sense of you sitting here. You can take a deeper breath or two down into your belly if you wish. Put your hand on your belly. It can be good to keep yourself grounded. And then I want you to think back over the last day or two, or further if you need to. And just bring yourself back to a time when your experience was predominated or strongly colored by one of the poisons, by greed, hatred, delusion. Maybe you lost your temper with someone, or you acted motivated by greed. Or maybe you just did something that really wasn't helpful to yourself or to others. And you're not doing this to give yourself a hard time or to get yourself up. So just bringing yourself back to what actually happened and how it felt like. How did it make you feel? Again, without like getting lost in it or giving yourself a hard time about it. What kind of world did you find yourself in at that point? What did the world seem like to you, if you can remember that? In particular, how connected did you feel to other people? And then when you're ready, letting go of that. Come back to your breath again, a deeper breath in the body. And this time, bring yourself back to a time when your experience was predominated by generosity, or by love, or by awareness, or by wisdom, or any of the positives that we typed into the chat box there. I'm not qualifying this or taking away from it, just experiencing it as a positive. How did it make you feel? What kind of world did it create for you? What did your world look like or feel like more accurately when you're in this state of mind, this positive state of mind? If you can remember that. How connected were you with others in particular? And when you're ready, then you can start to bring the practice to a close. And in your own time, opening your eyes again. Okay, so do feel free to comment about that reflection in the chat if you want. So I'll just give people a second if they want to write anything, how that was for you, that reflection. So one of the things I was saying earlier in response to D is that we tend to create the world we live in with our mental states, with our mind, yeah? And one of the things, yeah, Colin said, it feels like I'm two different people. So in Buddhism, we talk about self and world, you could say, or self and other, or interior, exterior is how we often think of things. And we tend to think that the world is just out there, and we are very changing, you know what I mean? But actually, we create worlds for ourselves all the time, yeah? And, you know, if we're of a suspicious state of mind, for example, we will experience a world where everyone's kind of not worthy of trust, you know? And if we're of a state of mind where we have confidence in people, we trust them, we'll experience a world of connection, you know? So mind creates world. That's one of the central teachings of Buddhism. Mind creates world. And the self in here and the world out there are very, very much interlinked, very much subjective. And Einstein, even not a Buddhist at all, although he was seemed to be a fan of Buddhism, once said when he was talking about his theory of relativity that you can sit in an oven. No, what is it? You can sit beside a pretty girl for an hour and it'll feel like 5 minutes. And you can sit in an oven for 5 minutes, it can feel like an hour. Yeah. So you know, how we experience the world is very different according to the situation. Now, the traditional wheel of life talks about 6 different worlds that we can live in, or 6 different realms we could live in. So we could live as a god, someone who enjoys great pleasure, and life is very easy and unfolding. We could live as a titan, someone who lives in a world of competitiveness, of competition, of strife, of war. Well, war in the sense of competing with each other. Over here we have the human world, where the human realm, which is a realm of work, and you know, you can see family there, and artists and things like this, and creativity, you could say, of a worldly type. You could live down here as a hungry ghost. So I'll come back to those in a moment. You could live on the other side as an animal. I'll come back to those as well. And you can live as a being tormented in hell. And in traditional Buddhism, you know, if you went off to India or Tibet, they would say they're quite real states of that you, after you die, according to the kind of actions you lived out in your life, you would be reborn in one of those for the next life. And the life after that, you'd die and then you'd be reborn in another one. Yeah. And I'm open to that idea. I've no idea if it's true or not. You know, I do believe in rebirth. You're not required to believe in rebirth as, you know, to perhaps even be a Buddhist, you know what I mean? But I am quite open to rebirth. I do think mind continues in some form, because it seems, mind just seems too primary and too powerful to destroy. And mind doesn't just come out of matter, you know, in a certain way. It's primary, it's above and beyond matter, you could say. But I think what's more interesting for us here in terms of the six realms is not so much in terms of objective worlds that we can be reborn into, but rather psychological or spiritual states of mind that we can get into in this life. Yeah. And we are reborn in every moment in this lifetime. You know, you're not the same person you were yesterday. Every time you go to bed, you're not the same person when you wake up the next day. And you're not even the same person you were 15 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago when we started doing this section of the course. You know what I mean? So we're changing all the time. So we're being reborn in every moment, you could say. So I think it's much more interesting to look at these in terms of subjective states that we get into. Although I think, you know, who knows, there might well be objective states. So, and we create our worlds with our minds, yeah? And we can move between all six of these in an hour, you know what I mean? Or a day or a week or whatever it is, yeah? So I want to talk about the bottom three. Now, these are the more difficult three. They're called the worlds of woe sometimes. And Prasannadeva next week will talk about the three higher realms, which are much more easygoing and enjoyable in some ways. So tonight is the darker, well, darker, but tonight's a bit more bleak in some ways, although, as I said, the course will continue to get more and more positive in terms of talking about more and more creative minds. Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, there's the hell realm. Let's just dive right into the worst part of it. And so at the bottom, you have the hell realm. And this it's not really decorated there too much. You can kind of get a pretty graphic image of it. My picture isn't very clear, but let's see if we can. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. So hopefully that's a little, you can see a bit more there. You can see beings suffering. And if you go to the traditional Tibetan ones, for example, they've really worked it out where there's all these kind of beings being tortured in all kinds of ways. And I remember coming across this first, and I was shocked that Buddhism had hell, because, you know, I was brought up a Catholic and I wanted to get away from all that stuff, you know, and punishment and all that kind of thing. So, so traditionally, it is like there's a lot of different hells, and there's hot and cold, and there's hells for, you know, that are matched up the appropriateness of of the terrible thing you've done, like murderers or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. But I think an important thing to say, particularly if you're an ex-Catholic or whatever, like me, is that it's not about feelings of punishment or trying to evoke gloom and despair, or not trying to control you or guilt trip you into acting in a certain kind of way. It's not trying to be inhuman, you know. I think what it's trying to point out is that there are beings who live in a hellish state in this world. Yeah, or yeah, in the context of looking at these in terms of psychological states, there are beings who have a hellish existence, actually, you know. And you know, I'm sure some people's existence at the moment in the Ukraine, sometimes I'll read about, you know, situations in Africa with conflict minerals, or, you know, children who are enlisted into armies and forced to do terrible things. I think some of those states sound hellish, actually, you know. And I have friends who suffer very badly from depression at times, and they would describe themselves as you know, as the kind of the intense depression that they would feel as being hellish. So I think what it's trying to point out isn't so much that we'll be punished and go to hell. It's more saying that it's possible to be in hell in this life. You know, some people do from time to time, unfortunately, and we can see this as well. So here, hell is a state. It could be objectively, you know, something in the world around us is just causing a lot of suffering, or it could be more mental anguish like depression or paranoia and so on. And the particular state that's associated with hell is hatred. Hatred leads us into hell. So Prasannadeva has told us a story earlier about the samurai who had gotten intense anger, and the monk said to him, "This is hell." So one of the main ways to get to hell is through intense hatred and ill will. And, you know, all the species of hatred, such as blame, resentment, all those kinds of things tend to leave us in a very unpleasant state of mind, you know. Hatred can feel a bit powerful, but in a way, the heat of hatred is the heat of hell, you could say. And if we're in any way sensitive, we'll realize it's very, very painful to continually do hatred. In a way, hatred is the doorway to hell, you could say. And the antidote to hell, to these kinds of, to hatred basically, is love, is loving kindness, is the metta bhavana that we do. The metta bhavana is the cultivation of loving kindness practice that we do. And so like metta, loving kindness, if you haven't done the metta bhavana meditation practice, I'd really encourage you to learn it with us on one of our next courses. I'm doing a course after this, where I'll be teaching the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana and introducing people to Buddhism. So I'd really encourage you. It's a really important practice to do in the world, the metta bhavana. And here we're cultivating love as an antidote to hatred, cultivating well-wishing, not in any kind of sentimental way, but a very strong, powerful feelings of love to try and overcome hatred. Anyway, so there's the hell state, the hellish state that we can be in, the hell realm. And it's caused by, a lot of it's caused by hatred. And it's also caused by the underlying deluded view that we have to dislike people to be safe. And we have to respond to hatred with hatred. So Prasannadeva was also reading earlier on from the Dhammapada. And here's some of the verses again from the Dhammapada. The Buddha says, this is slightly later in the Dhammapada. He says, hatred is never destroyed by hatred. It is only destroyed by love. This is the eternal law. Yeah. So hatred is never destroyed by hatred. It's only destroyed by love. This is the eternal law. So somehow in hell, we have to learn how to love, and that will help us leave hell. And the other thing to say about hell is that in Buddhism, hell is not a punishment in a way. If we act in certain ways, we will cause ourselves suffering. You know, if we hate, we will end up in hellish states. Nobody's doing that to you but yourself, you know. So it's not a punishment, and it's also not permanent. Everything is impermanent in Buddhism. So one can go into hell and come out of hell, you know. And I'm sure at times we've all been in very, very difficult states of mind. And hopefully we have left those states of mind. One last thing or two about the hell realm is that, well, about the 6 realms indeed, is that in each of the 6 realms, and you don't really see this in this Wheel of Life, the Buddha appears. And the Buddha appears with what the beings in that realm most actively need, or most desperately need. Yeah. And what the people in the hell realm most desperately need, what the Buddha gives to them is, in Buddhism, it's called amrita. So it's kind of a nectar which soothes pain and suffering. Yeah. So in a way, when we're in a hellish state, what we need to do is find some way to try and ease the suffering. Because if we're in suffering, it's very hard to do anything else but react mindlessly to that in a way, and just get ourselves into more suffering. You know, you layer on stories about how awful everything is. So you're trying to have the nectar of the Buddha, you could say, to just try and get yourself out of suffering. Or if you're with someone who's suffering, you just need to get them out of that state. There's no point lecturing someone who's in an intense state of suffering that they brought this on themselves. You know, you just want to get them through it. You want to get them out of it. You know, and that's the Buddha responding with nectar. And Buddhism is always really clear that you should always try and alleviate suffering. You know, there's no interest in punishment in Buddhism. Yeah. And the other interesting thing about the hell realm is that there's most opportunities to grow here. Yeah, it's one of the most fruitful parts of the 6 realms where one can make progress, because one really desperately wants to get out of hell. So one really wants to go and really practice the Buddha's teachings to get out of hell. So it's the one where the most opportunities are actually of all the realms. Now, you could say the human realm is a good realm to practice in, but you can also get very complacent in the human realm, for example. But when you're in hell, you really want to get out of it. And I've noticed this before, for example, in the Buddhist Centre, where we've run courses for people with chronic pain, and you don't need to explain to them that they need to practice really intensely. You know, they get it really quickly because they've got skin in the game, so to speak. Yeah. Okay, so that's the hell realm. The next realm is the one on the left. So it's these weird shaped beings. And these are skeletal and hungry beings who have tiny little mouths and very big stomachs. And they're called hungry ghosts. And they have unquenchable thirst and unquenchable hunger, unsatisfiable hunger. But they have such small little mouths that they can't get anything in to satisfy the hunger and the thirst. And they live out their lives. Their lives are driven by unbearable craving for food and drink, yeah, food and water. And they live out their life. Their lives become predominated by that craving. And in a way, it's a kind of a hell, you could say as well. But this is a hell of craving, whereas the other one was a hell of hatred. Yeah. And then to bring it into the more subjective realm, you could say it's the realm of neurotic craving, of intense desire for things that can't satisfy you. It's only living to gather things and to have things. Craving is defined in Buddhism by, well, one way of looking at craving is that it's the idea that having things or experiences will make you happy. Having them will make you happy. We're trying to fill the inner emptiness that we experience. And things can fill an inner emptiness, but only very, very temporarily. You get a new phone and you feel really good about yourself again, but that wears off terrifyingly quickly, The classic example in the world of the hungry ghosts would be addicts, drug addicts, or any kind of addiction would be talking about the realm of hungry ghosts, And I have many friends who've been through difficulties with addiction, and one of the common things they say is that it really is just trying to find something to fill an inner gap, and a lack of higher meaning in their lives. And once they've come across the Buddhist teachings, once they've come across the Dharma, it does a huge job in filling that need. But the problem is you look for fulfillment in things in the world which can't give you fulfillment. Yeah. And we can be addicted to anything. Well, not anything, but we can be addicted to so many different things. We can be addicted to drugs, drink, food, status. You can be addicted to just money. You know what I mean? There's so many different things that we can be compulsive about. So this is the world of compulsiveness, of neurotic craving, of repetition. And in a way, modern culture is creating hungry ghosts, because modern culture, modern consumer culture, depends upon breeding hungry ghosts who believe that you only need to consume the right experiences or have the right things to be happy. And social media is kind of a slight realm of hungry ghosts as well. You're always looking for that thing which will satisfy you, but whatever you take in, it's never quite substantial. It never quite satisfies your desires. And at its strongest extreme, it leaves you emotionally alienated from any kind of creativity, and lacking any kind of inner riches. I guess it could be defined by the phrase, "If I only had this, I'd be happy." Yeah, if I only had this, I'd be happy. And it's probably worth saying as well that there's nothing wrong with healthy desires. Healthy desires like a genuine desire for sustenance, for food, for water, for friendship, for spiritual practice, for meaning, for connection, for love. All those are healthy desires, and there's nothing wrong with those. Our desire for beauty as well, for higher meaning. All those are really good things. So this is more where you're being really neurotic about things which can't bring you happiness, And the Buddha in this realm appears with food and drink that will actually satisfy you. So he appears with food and drink that will actually satisfy you. And you could say that these are more higher values, or things that will actually meet your inner yearnings, like friendship, like beauty, like spiritual meaning, like higher value, and so on. That's the food and drink that will really satisfy us. So it's an interesting question. What will actually satisfy our desires? And if you're in a state of craving during the week, it is interesting to ask, what will truly satisfy me here? And we get on to the sugar train, where we think a bit of sugar is nice and it satisfies us for about 10 seconds, and then we need more. Or we get into metaphorical sugar trains where, we get a hit of something like being popular or being liked or something like that, but then we're not liked in the next minute and we need more of it, So I'm aware there's a few questions there I'm just spotting. I'll come back to them in a moment. So that's the hungry ghosts. And then over on the right, we have the animal realm. So this is the realm which is purely about the life of the body. You know, you can actually satisfy yourself on an everyday level with food, sex, sleep, and those kinds of things. But you've no desire whatsoever for higher values. So that's the animal realm. And if there's one thing I can say about all of you, is that something must have brought you here tonight to this course. So you all must have some desire for higher value. And the animal realm is the opposite of that. It's not neurotic as such. It can actually be a bit easy to be in the animal realm. And I think actually another thing that modern society does is it makes life quite comfortable, where you can your whole life becomes just about your next meal or your next bit of pleasure or your next nice movie, you know, things like that. And that's somewhat of an animal realm, actually, where there's nothing higher beyond that. There's just a kind of a slightly more refined hedonism at work. And yeah, you live without any kind of vision or culture. And I think this is especially true with the death of religion as a central part of life. Now, in a way, I think that's probably no bad thing in some ways, that the old religions, like I was raised a Catholic and I'm quite happy to have left that behind. But we do still need higher value and higher culture and so on. And if we live in the animal realm, we will tend to deny all creative tendencies. So the Buddha appears in this realm with a book representing culture, representing higher values. Yeah, and so it's worth asking yourself, you know, am I just having a really comfortable life without any kind of strain or any kind of higher values at work? You know, indeed, it's worth asking about any of those three realms. You know. The hell realm, you know, I mean, if you're in the hell realm, you'll know about it, basically, you know, and you'll want to get out of it. Are you in the realm of neurotic craving, which is the hungry ghosts, or are you in the animal realm? You know, and again, we'll bounce into all these at different times. So there are three of the realms of the six realms. Yeah, there's a few comments there. Yeah, I don't think there's many questions. Thanks for those comments, everyone, and Mairead. So, okay, I'm running a little over time. So why don't we do a short reflection just for 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll go into groups for the last few minutes, and then I'll give you the home practice as well in a few moments. So why don't we just close our eyes again when we're ready, just sit comfortably. This will be short, I'm afraid, but we'll do it anyway. It's worth doing for a couple of minutes. Taking a deeper breath or two. Just asking yourself, can you think of times where you've ended up in one of these three realms we've described? Maybe you've spent time in the hell realm of hatred or some other kind of state of mind that was very painful to bear. Or maybe you're in the realm of the hungry ghosts, where you've been really craving something to happen and going over it again and again to try and have this thing happen. And how unpleasant that can be. Or the animal realm, where it's all a bit comfortable or easy or just a bit lazy, perhaps, a bit mundane, but just nothing higher at work. You don't have to try and remember all of those three, but maybe just pick one. And then you can either reflect upon the Buddha appearing with what gets you out of it, or maybe you can think about what got you out of it when you were in it. So in hell, the Buddha appears with nectar that soothes and helps the pain. The hungry ghosts, he gives food and drink which can actually satisfy, such as the Dharma. And in the animal realm, he brings a book representing culture or some kind of quest for higher values. Just seeing if there's anything that really strikes you about any of those. And particularly important, just finishing on a positive. What might the Buddha's teaching be for you in this situation? And when you're ready, then bringing the practice to a close, and you can reopen your eyes. Okay, so just to say that that material, the 6 realms can't, talking about hell and stuff can feel a bit severe, but we are talking about states of mind that we can find ourselves in, and it is about moving more and more to creativity. So we will, as the course goes on, we'll be talking more and more about how to move towards creativity. Okay, so I'm going to give you the home practice, and then we'll go into groups for 12 minutes. So the home practice, so read the next few pages of the book. If you haven't read the book, read up to page 25. And after that, then, if you already learned to meditate with us, meditate every day, and same as last week. Notice the mind reactive and the creative mind at work. Notice the reactive and creative mind at work in your life. That's pretty much the homework every week. But in particular, notice what worlds or states in the wheel we occupy, particularly if you go into the 3 states that we've talked about. And next week, we'll talk about the next three states of mind. And what can we do about these? What is the Buddha showing us? What is the way out? Yeah, what can we learn from them? And how do we get ourselves into them as well? Yeah. So I'll email you all that later, or tomorrow actually. So let's go into the groups for 12 minutes again, Oscar, if you want to send us in. And we can chat about anything from the reflection or the material or what we want to do with the homework. And then we'll finish up after the groups.